to like share even more. Oh, we're just getting recorded. To go ahead and like share a little bit more about the program. So that informs hubs on like what is that program offering that a family is looking for. We're seeing a lot of like printing and distribution of like marketing pieces. I've seen some of the stuff that like, Washington County develops for grantees, right? There's like flyers, there's pamphlets, that then can go ahead and be shared and distributed in community about preschool promise. And I'm being very specific about like preschool promise right now. What does that recruitment look like for an early learning hub? We've seen like presentations that hubs do at different, either cultural specific organizations in community. We've seen nonprofits, housing assistance, WIC offices, and some of those pieces. Like those are, that this was some of the activities that we've been seeing. And then, maintaining a website that clearly talks about preschool promise and like, how do you enroll? What are the different programs that are participating? It's really like focus on the family. What is that family really looking like? And then we've seen a lot of different, we know that everybody's at different stages, but we've seen a lot of like marketing and advertisement through like magazines, through bus stops, through billboards, TV ads, radio ads, and some of those pieces to really share in community what preschool promise is all about and why they should enroll. There's one thing that I think in our previous implementations with preschool promise, just, at the very beginning, there were only so few slots. We never really have done any like mass marketing and advertisement for like preschool promise, but we have definitely seen some great like efforts like by each hub region, really just taking on that role and sharing that with families within their hub region about preschool promise. Connecting with local media outlets and ensure that, more brand awareness, right, about the program. We've seen a lot of like events as well. So just sharing like, hey, it may look like going and attending an event for families and distributing not just preschool promise, but also information about other publicly funded programs. And I won't go into each of like the bullets, but this is a good way, like when we're coming together and say, well, that's what it says on the grant, that hubs that do like recruitment for preschool promise. Well, what have we seen like that in practice, right? What are you all doing to go ahead and spread the word out there for families who are eligible to participate in the program, like social media advertisement, brand awareness, some designs, some billboards, and some of those pieces. And then we know that in some, in some regions that we've seen a lot of profiles about like that preschool promise grantee. I'll go ahead and use South Central, for example. I've seen that you go to their website, there's a video, there's a profile, like as a family, like what is it that this specific like grantee is offering. So lots of great work there. And now we're going to go ahead and turn our attention to the grantee. So if the hub is doing all of this awesome stuff for preschool promise and community, then what is really the grantee's role, right? So we went ahead and have this slide, and you'll get that PowerPoint presentation later on. And what we're saying is like grantee recruitment activities may include attending occasional preschool promise events in collaboration with their hub or in collaboration with their community, or they may attend those events themselves. Using the materials offered by the early learning hubs to go ahead and spread that and share that in community. We've seen and top of mind right now, I'll go ahead and use Washington County, for example, because they send us some awesome pictures there about like, hey, they're having times where like grantees are coming and say, hey, here's some of the materials that we've developed. So then that grantee can go ahead and turn around and distribute, through their own channels of whether it's with families or other outlets there. And then, some of those activities may include like maintaining a positive brand and community of their business, because we understand that the hub can go ahead and recruit, Dana's preschool, but then it's also, I have a role for my business to go ahead and ensure that that I, as a business, have a good brand in my community. The people know about Dana's preschool. The people know about what services and products or anything that I'm offering, what is making unique. So we are kind of shifting, like trying to go ahead and clarify, like, yes, hub preschool promise, but you preschool promise grantee, you have a role about your business and how you market your own business and community. And that's, maintaining, a quality program, making sure that they have their own social media for their business, answering calls from interested, customers and all that stuff. And then I have here, like, maintaining their own business and social medias, making sure they're up to date. I cannot tell you the many business owners in the past that I have seen that they still don't take advantage of, like, their listings, right? Their business listings, like in Google and Yelp and some of those pieces, right? So we're really trying to say, like, you grantee your business, right? It's like making sure that your business is out there in community. So then when South Central has, a nice little profile on their website about Dana's preschool, someone's Googling Dana's preschool, they're able to go ahead and make that connection. Like, well, this is a business that has been in business for X amount of years. And then we put offering to go ahead and do some open houses and individual tours, right? Because families want to be able to go ahead and visit the facility, want to be able to know what does that entity look like. Share their own expertise on their community with the hub as far as, like, some targeted advertising. We have a lot of culturally specific programs to say, hey, collaborate with the hub, share some of that, some of the expertise that you have on how to reach some of those, some of your customers and culturally specific programs. And then we have here working with CCRR or a business coach to create a marketing plan or communication plan for their own business. Once again, right? It's like how they're spreading that awareness out there. And then receiving feedback from families, community members, and or participating in conversation with CCRR about potential service policy changes, right? Being able to go ahead and take some of the feedback that we're hearing from families and be able to make some changes in their business. So as you can see, like, once again, hubs, big preschool promise advertisement, grantee, making sure they're collaborating with hub, they're sharing some good practices, but they're also really focused on, like, what does that brand look like for their business and community, so then everything can kind of come together. And then we have a role, with the CCRNRs as far as, like, okay, so what about, like, that grantee that may need a little bit more assistance. So then we'll go ahead and touch base a little on the CCRR here, but I'll go ahead and turn it over to Carmen here so she can talk to us about the roles with the CCRR. Go ahead, Carmen.
Thanks, Dana. Yeah, so for the CCRRs, I first want to stress, this is not adding anything. We're putting this on here, or including this to make sure that everyone is just on the same page, and specifically to make sure that providers are aware that this resource is there for them. I know that they all know that you're there, and that they will have with your coaches, that they'll have agreements in place and they'll be working with them. But sometimes what we've noticed is that they might forget that you also have a variety of services and places that you can refer them to. So just thinking about, if this is the little, like, this is how many people are in preschool, these are preschool promise providers, they're within the big circle of all providers, and that makes them eligible to receive those services. So the way that we have summarized it is that CCRRs are available to offer all early learning care and providers in the region, including preschool promise grantees, technical assistance, and consultation on business practices. And also just letting grantees know that you also participate in that regional stewardship committee or early learning sector committee that's mentioned above. And then we've laid out things that you are already doing, but bulleted them to make sure that people understand that those are available. And again, really wanting to be on the same page and make sure that everyone is hearing the same information so that hubs know, like, have this in front of them and can refer providers over for additional support, and vice versa. So CCRNRs who are working with preschool promise providers in a scenario like doing some business coaching with them will also be able to refer to the information above under grantee role and be able to say, like, it looks like this is what's expected of you here, and look, this is what your hub is going to be doing.
Yeah, so that was, as we're continuing to go ahead and work this, it's really just solidifying, and not really solidifying, it's really just saying, like, well, what does it look like in practice, right? Like, we all have a role for recruitment. There's also a role here at the ELD when it comes to recruitment too. Like, we have received some, some feedback or saying, like, hey, what about, like, is ELD going to go ahead and do like any kind of like statewide preschool promise advertisement? What does that look like, right? And how do we ensure that we do that without also like confusing the system with all the great work that has already been done in community too? So more to come on that. Unfortunately, I do have a hard stop right now here at 1:30, but as Carmen mentioned, if there's any feedback, any thoughts, go ahead and send that Carmen's way for now. And then, we're working in collaboration here internally. And then our goal is to go ahead and share that with our grantees next week. So they also see, because it can be very confusing for them as well. Like, yeah, the hub does recruitment, so I'm okay. It's like you have your role is maybe different. Your role is really for your business, and what does that look like, and how those two bodies kind of come and work in collaboration. So I really appreciate you all. Thank you. Any feedback, just go and follow up with Carmen, and then we'll look to go ahead and share with you the full presentation, once we don't have technical difficulties here. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
And I know Dana had to jump, but again, we're here to hear some feedback on that. We have a couple minutes set aside just to get any like initial feedback, comments, concerns, questions, and I can send out like the draft document that has all of that in one place as well. So people can look it over and take some time, and of course, discuss with staff and see what their input is too, if that's helpful. Any thoughts?
Hey, Carmen, it's Michelle. I think there's some questions and comments in the chat. You might want to.
Okay, I had to jump out and come back in for it to let me record, so I can't read all the way up.
Let's see. Yes, recording it. Looks like in Marion County, they have a question about, when does a smart sheet update for, I think she means the dashboard for Preschool Promise.
Yeah, Michelle, just FYI, I was able to respond through private message to Sky and Lisa. Thank you.
Perfect. Did you catch anything else, Angela, as far as questions?
Molly had a question about the meeting on the 22nd and whether it would be recorded, and it will, and it will be posted on the Preschool Promise YouTube channel. But also, this is one where we would really love whoever is not taking time off. I know we're competing with a holiday, but whoever can join would be more than welcome. We'd love to have you. And I put the link to the bulletin that includes a link to register for that meeting in the chat.
Okay, I'll send out the document, I think tomorrow morning, and feel free to, Cheryl, go ahead.
Well, you asked for any thoughts. In Lane County, we have some providers that are anxious about filling slots, and having the conversation, but it feels like there's an issue kind of around the who's responsible to whether or not they're full, right? So I think we have a couple places that are doing all these things, connecting with the hub, that we're connected. They're, putting up lawn signs and going to the library, but ultimately they don't know. Yeah, they're just anxious because it's a lot of responsibility to make sure their slots are full. And this is especially the new providers. We just keep saying, like, just keep doing your best kind of thing. Is there any other messaging that you would share?
Sorry. Yeah, thanks, Cheryl. That's a great question. I agree with your messaging, like checking in with them, understanding what they're doing on your end, providing any additional suggestions or input as far as like what has worked for similar providers in similar regions. I think that's great. And I would also say, just to if they have any other thoughts on what might work or has worked for them, to check in with the hub. And then that's also a place that, as we see internally at the ELD, if we're seeing that there are providers who are under enrolled, that we can check in with coordinated enrollment staff and just do some thinking together about what we know has worked in other regions and with similar providers, and see if there's other resources that are available. We definitely want to make sure that everyone is filling all the slots that they expected they'd be able to fill. Hopefully, in a perfect system, that's how it happens. So that's what we're all working toward together. And I know that that's sort of the who is responsible to it is a tough one, because it is possible that we can all play our role to a T and not have slots perfectly filled if we have placed slots in places where there might not be enough kids. And that's a hard one for providers. And that is a really big part of the reason that we want to make sure that we're sharing out this information, like what these expectations and roles are, so that providers have an understanding of what their component of it, what's their part of it. Did that answer your question? Okay, Lisa, and then Begonia.
Hi there. I just wanted to say thank you for this information. And I know a conversation that I've had with a couple at the ELD is that I am hopeful with all of the delays in, we are where we are, right? And I think there needs to be a recognition and an honoring that this is probably going to take a little bit of time for these slots. It could take some time for these slots to fill. We're coming up on the holidays. Families aren't normally looking for preschool in November, all of the things. And so my advice, or at least not advice, that's not the right word, but my hope is that at least for the next quarter, there will be a little bit of a grace given to the providers, because I know there's a lot of anxiety around the message that, your slots could be reduced if you don't fill them within a period of time. And that's a heart palpitation for our providers. So I don't know that I want to underscore that anymore, but I'm just really hopeful that the division is going to offer the providers and the hub and the CCRR systems a little bit of grace to get them filled. And if ever you are wanting some, I think the information that was shared today is great. And if you want to know what each of us are doing individually within our regions, it'd be great to have an opportunity to share that with you all.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. And you're welcome to give us advice. I totally see that. I think that you're right. We're late and we need to give our full system time to catch up, right? There's only so much you can do in a certain amount of time. So not anticipating, I'm anticipating that the timeline that we were gonna for the enrollment work will also, sorry, that was a terrible sentence. Let me try again. I think that everyone is in agreement at the division that we need to let the system catch up regionally to where we are. So, and we know that it is anxiety producing to providers and want to do the best that we can to alleviate that and to be good partners to them and support them. And I know like a document like this is late in coming, but I think that it will help us move. It's going to help us move toward having more clear expectations and timelines. And there are some more timelines and communications that need to be laid out and shared and repeated, right? Because it's not, we're not going to say all these things one time and then have it. Okay, great. Everyone knows. Begonia?
Yeah, I just want you to know, Carmen, that a provider actually said that it is the ELD, the one that is telling providers that is the role of the hub. And they actually are even telling us the name of the ELD staffing that are the ones providing those recommendations or pointing at us, which I might believe it or not, right? But I just want you to know that, clarify that if anybody is giving conflicting information, that shouldn't be the case, right? The second thing, I think that the most important thing for many of the providers at this point is the correlation between the slots and payments. They want an answer about what is going to happen to them if they are not full. And that is getting on the way. I do not think that even if you explain it to them, I do not believe that everybody has a solid understanding of the implication or the correlation between the slots and the payments.
Begonia, I'm going to repeat that back to you to make sure I understood what you just said. You said that you feel like even if we have told people that the payment is correlated to the slot, that they don't understand that.
I think that people don't know what to expect. I think that some people on their minds, you have only 3 slots, that's how much you're gonna be compensated for, right?
Oh.
So again, whatever explanation you gave to them about the relationship between the slots and the payments, say it again, because that's creating a lot of anxiety, okay? If you say, doesn't matter how many kids do you have at the end of the month, you can submit your claims to EGANS, that's what it is, right? But a lot of people cannot wrap their head around payments.
Thanks, Begonia. I'm taking notes, things to pass along. Heather, and then I know there's a couple comments in the chat I want to catch up to.
Thanks, Carmen. I guess what's kind of floating around in my head is that I know that we do have spaces in our preschool promises to fill, but I hope that doesn't manifest in a way that ends up negating us presenting options to parents, because ultimately we want them to be informed about the different kinds of care that's available to their children. And if we're just putting them right into our preschool promise without creating an education piece for parents, then they don't know what they don't know. And I know we have some children that have some needs that are preschool promise is a perfect placement for them, but there are also some children that may be better suited to other programs. And you know, do our families really even know what the expectation is? Maybe this is the first time they've been in a group care situation too. So at what point are those conversations going to happen? And I hope we don't toss those out the window, so we can just, because we're pushing filling before educating.
Yeah, we were actually just talking about that really kind of like naming that as a thing we wanted to talk about a lot more internally this morning in our community systems team meeting, was that consumer education piece and making sure that that we're not missing that in preschool promise, because yeah, like we want to make sure that we want our preschool promise programs to all be really high quality, right? So that no matter what a family chooses, they're getting quality, but that doesn't take away the need for a family to do their own process and their own research to understand how a program will serve their family and whether it does serve what their family needs and is looking for. So we have to find that balance. Thank you. I agree with you. Oh, sorry, the chat box. Pretty enough. Oh, Sky, yeah, families that we thought would convert that don't qualify. That's really disappointing. And Renee, I hear you. Continually communicating that family choice is a huge factor is really important. And exploring with programs why families might not be selecting their site is important. And this is one of those places where really that partnership between CCRR and the hub and Preschool Promise coaching and that staff can really be leveraged in terms of having communication with providers to directly let them know, like the hub can let them like, this is what we're hearing. You know, sometimes people like, this is what people are understanding about your program and coming back to with if they're naming a reason that they didn't want to enroll. And then bringing in CCRR to help unpack what that might be, what that might mean, where like a perception might come from, and then looking for solutions to that if that's something that providers are ready to work on. Because we have heard in several regions that, or from several of you that does happen sometimes, right? There are plenty of times that families have been referred, have gone to a program and come back, and it might be, it just didn't feel right, or I didn't like the way that the provider said something to a child, and I didn't really like the way that they were spoken to, or something about the environment physically didn't feel right. And so, you know, as good partners, that's part of our role is to give those messages that can be hard to hear, but also to be there to support them in making changes that they need in order to have the quality of program that they're looking for. You know, everyone has blind spots, and I think that our childcare programs can have blind spots too. And so being the kind of partners who can help people address those is really important. And I know that you're all doing that every day. So nothing new, but just to name that as something that definitely needs to happen within Preschool Promise as well. Well, thank you all for that, for this conversation and for the feedback. Again, I will send out the document where Dana was pulling her PowerPoint bullets from. It seems like at this point, the feedback is less the content and more about like how we deliver that and how we have these shared expectations and then related concerns that we have. So I'll try to send out a little summary about that too. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Erin. I know that there's a lot of really great work going on out there, and people have been eager to share with each other and learn from each other. So we were able to hold this time with you, and I hope that people will be able to stay. Appreciate your conversation so far and look forward to hearing more about the RSA. Welcome, Erin. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's nice to see your celebrity star little squares today. So we took a poll at the last hub director meeting, I think that's what you call them, about topics that you all would like to talk about for peer-to-peer. And there was two that tied. One was on methods hubs are using to ask RSA questions. And the other was, how do you talk with hub partners about systems change, build buy-in around systems change, et cetera. So given they were tied, we thought we'd do the method one today, given a lot of hubs are still like in the thick of gathering regional system assessment information. So that's the ordering we're going to do. And my role today is really purely as a facilitator. So I'm going to kind of bring us through a choose your own adventure process where you can really learn from each other and think about how to apply some of that learning moving forward. So let me share my screen really quick. Can you guys see that? Okay, so I just wanted to let people know from the coach's perspective, since we're talking to a lot of you, what methods we're seeing hubs use so far or plan to use to ask their RSA regional system assessment questions. I'll go through 4 types of methods that I'm seeing. And if you have others that you're using, you can add to this list. So my plan is to show us all these methods and then ask you all to kind of decide which of these do you want to do peer learning around. And once we select one, then we can really get into some good detail around what are people learning? What have they tried? What's worked? What hasn't worked? How can we think about using this method in other ways, etc. So let's start out with just kind of reviewing what are people doing. The most frequent one that we're seeing is asking regional system assessment questions during meetings, usually hub meetings, but y'all have a lot of meetings going on and people are doing a really good job of utilizing those. Some people are using that carousel facilitation process where you break people up. They kind of go between different stations almost, asking different types of assessment questions. Others just put it on the agenda. They're asking like large group kind of discussion questions. There's different ways people have done that, but we're seeing a lot of that happening. People are using natural touch points with system partners, like, hey, someone has a meeting coming up with so-and-so and they need to ask some questions about a regional system assessment area. Or they're trying to take advantage of touch points, natural touch points with families to ask questions. This one is, I think, more of an aspirational one that people are really excited about and trying to pull some things together around peer networks. So one idea a lot of hubs are interested in is how do you hire parents from your parent council or other kind of parent entities to go out and ask regional system assessment questions with other families in your priority populations, and not only paying the families who are asking those questions, but also paying the families, of course, who are giving input. And so how do you use this method not only to get regional system assessment information, but also to build regional capacity to engage families and build family leadership, parent leadership skills. Also talking about doing that same approach with partners, having them go to their own networks, their own external collaborative meetings and ask some questions on the hub's behalf and bring it back. And then finally, there's like a lot of behind the scenes reconnaissance going on by hub staff where they're looking into records, they're trying to dig out and really figure out what is actually going on. For example, like looking at the contracts that school districts have with ECE staff and really kind of figuring out what are the holes here? How do we understand what's breaking down? Sending emails with very targeted questions to individuals just to get like very kind of specific things answered, really low, doesn't take a lot of like additional time to do that. It's just sending out those emails. All right, so this is what I've got. This is what we've seen so far. I don't know if others have additional sweet methods that they're using. If you do, throw them in the chat and we can add them into this list. But as you look at this, what are people most interested in getting some peer-to-peer kind of learning with your colleagues, your peers? Which of these 4 methods are people most interested in diving into? So I think we'll probably have time to do 2, maybe 3, depending on how long the conversation goes. So kind of keep that in mind. What do people think? It's up to you. I've got slides prepared for all 4. So you get to choose. Lisa's laughing. Of course I do, right? Pick which method you all are interested in diving into most. And you can use the chat or you could just unmute yourself.
I would say behind the scenes.
Ooh. we got two simultaneous behind the scenes.
Ooh,
All right.
all right, Charlotte.
All right, let's do it. Let's do behind the scenes and then we'll pick another one. So here are my questions for you. Hold on, click, click, click. Boop. There you go. And spoiler alert, they're the same questions for each of these methods. So once we get one, we can kind of just apply it to the others. So 4 questions I have for you, and feel free to ask additional questions. And again, my role is to facilitate, not to answer these questions. How have you used this method so far to gather RSA questions? Tell us about how you've done this, what you've done, what's worked and why. How can we amplify that, continue it, reinforce it? What hasn't worked as well with this behind the scenes method and why? And how could that be addressed, troubleshooted? You can engage your peer community here in helping to troubleshoot. And how else could you see your hub using this method, both within the RSA, but also outside of it? And just start kind of percolating some ideas around that. So it probably makes the most sense to start with question 1. But I think you can weave in some of these other questions just as you talk. So who has done some behind the scenes reconnaissance work in their regional system assessment?
Erin, I don't know if this is what you're asking, but something that we have done is asked our partners to share with us their data and information on what their capacity is, how many kids they have in their programs by geography, so that we can take a look at that, and then have been using the domain areas, asking through a wide variety of groups those domain areas and looking at those questions about, what's working, what could be better, and what are some of the challenges. So that's sort of how we've gone. In some ways, it's sort of behind the scenes, because we're sort of getting data from a lot of different sources to be able to populate that information within the Excel file, as well as getting a variety of different looks at those domain areas.
Have you found anything to be that's helped actually get people to respond? Because I think the biggest pitfall here, right, is you send out a bunch of emails, you try to get a bunch of people to respond, and then no one responds.
Yeah,
That's happened to anyone. But Lisa, have you found any strategies or techniques or kind of things that have worked really well that you want to share with your peers?
well, I think, going to our known groups, right, that's worked. Our parent advisory committee has been a really thoughtful source. Also, our regional stewardship committee, also known as our regional implementation team. We're going to, also, just with other groups like our collective action team, we might be just taking 1 or 2 things, doing things in sort of bite-sized chunks. And I guess that's what I would say is sort of think about your audience, who you have in the moment, and then take some bite-sized chunks off of that. I think also sort of what we know about our community through previous surveys, that Child Care Resource and Referral does an annual survey. And so that has is a source of information that we're looking at as a way to sort of mine that. So kind of, so that we're not just sort of recreating everything. And then, one thing that we've been talking about internally as a team is how does this help us tell the story that we want to tell about our region, and what data or information or questions or do we need to ask to be able to reflect not only, so the data we want, the story we want to tell, that's always, sort of a positive thing, but part of the story is where are the opportunities? Where do we need to be really focusing in? We might be doing some amazing things in this zip code, but wow, this zip code over here is, we need some attention and love.
Good. Athena, you got your hand up.
This is something we've used quite a bit as we've been going through it. And what we've done is we did the carousel project, and then we've gone through as a group, Jillian, myself, Danielle, and really picked out pieces that may have been missing things and put in what all makes sense, so that you get the full picture. And something that we've used is a barrier we've seen a lot with school districts is the collective bargaining piece. And that's something that has come up in meetings time and time again. And how, you know, some of their contracts may be getting in the way of hiring preschool teachers through the school districts. So that's something that we've used, is just recalling all of our meetings and our conversations with our partners over the years, and really just putting it all in here, as well as, you know, the past surveys that we've done, and talking with parents, and some of that like behind the scenes pieces that we use every day. You know, we're in tons of meetings. We hear so much information that while we may not be directly asking the question, we're still receiving input regularly. So as we're receiving that, even though we're not directly asking the question, we're going through and adding those pieces to the carousel project and putting it all together so it's all collected in one space, so we can get a more full understanding of what that looks like.
I like joke in every coaching call with people when we're going through all their data, and we'll just be looking at things and I'll ask a clarification question, and you all have so much that you know from exactly like what Athena was saying. Like, you're talking to people and you have side conversations, and you know, you have a lot, you know, and you're perfectly equipped to kind of follow up. You know, there's always things that emerge when you summarize all your information, like, oh, we don't quite understand what's going on here, or we need to talk to so-and-so to clarify this. It's such a simple like email or side conversation at a meeting. You guys are so like perfectly positioned to do that. I've been so impressed, really, as we've gone through this with just how nimble you are at getting information when you need it. Has anyone found something that has gotten in the way of doing this, like something that hasn't worked so well, that could use troubleshooting?
This isn't an answer to that. I was just going to offer one of a strategy that I don't know that I fully intentionally realized I'm using it, but it's very helpful, is leveraging my backbone organizations, what they have available. And so for me, that's like our ESD has done a survey of all of the SSA plans of our school districts. And so being able to access documents like that to know where early learning is showing up in the plans that our superintendents have. So they just had an early learning conversation with our regional superintendents 2 weeks ago. And so trying to leverage some of the other ways in which my backbone organization has answered some of these questions, or a version of the questions, but gets at the same kind of information, has been a strategy that I have unintentionally realized. And I just would say that about kind of multiple things, is like, I mean, it's what you were just saying, Erin, is like unintentionally, there's a lot, like, this is the core of what we do, I think, all of the time. Yes. And so sometimes what I struggle with is fitting it into the structure of, like, you know, like fitting it into the structure, period. And like, then putting my arms around it, because it, at least for doing this work now for 7 years as an early learning hub, some of it feels so innate, and I have to take a step back and go like, oh, that's how I'm doing that thing. And I'm actually getting answers to that questions that I already know, because I've had these kinds of conversations for the last 7 years.
Totally. And it's almost like a discipline, you know, you hear all this stuff and you need somewhere to put it. Otherwise it just sort of stays in the ether and it doesn't become actionable, because it's never like a focus of the work, you know, actually written down, prioritized, strategized around, and linked to all the other issues that are happening, you know? So I think what I'm observing is hub staff, like you're talking about, Dorothy, this is like an opportunity just to get a new rhythm of any time you're learning about what's getting in the way of access from all your multiple natural interactions in the system. you collectively now have a place to organize and like make sense of all of that. So you can actually use it to inform strategies. So I see that as like a really cool thing that's happening across the hubs. And I love the way that you just described that. Like you don't even realize you're doing it all the time. What else do people have to share on the behind the scenes method before we move on to another one?
And I think that that's a good reminder too, because I know there have been pieces when you and I have looked through the carousel where you will ask a question. And I know that our groups know about it because it's come up in all of our meetings, but I forget that it's not necessarily something that everybody knows. Our leadership groups know, but not the state may not know about that, or somebody from the outside may not have an idea that that's happening. So remembering to put it down, even when it seems really obvious to us who work in it every day, is such an important reminder.
Especially as you all are bringing in new partners, you know, like on everyone's RSA process, everyone's talking about leveraging current partnerships and expanding them. And whenever you bring in new cross-sector partners, like they don't know the acronyms, they don't know the history. I'm kind of like this perfect bellwether, right? Because I read all your data and I just naturally have questions on things that I don't know about. And so kind of put yourself in that mindset. What would someone who's not steeped in this for the last 10 years, who knows everything, you know, who's not swimming in the water of your region, what would they need to know? What details would they need to really understand that issue? That's like pushing yourself to get to that level of detail, so that you can bring more partners along with you and they don't feel like they're never quite grasping what's going on. That's great, Athena. Guys, don't worry if you have to leave. We understand. This is just kind of a an opportunity for anyone who can be here. I'm just reading the chat. People are saying sorry to leave. All right. Do you feel like we've tapped this one? Any other things? Okay. Brenda's like, yes, let's move on. Okay. I love you all so much. I'm starting to really know all your tells. Here we go. All right, here's our list again. What's another one that people feel like they'd like some discussion around?
I think maybe I'm curious about how folks are using natural touch points, and particularly from the perspective of, I think a mantra we often say as hub leaders is like, our partners are just as much at capacity as we are. And so I'm curious how like just capacity and asking, it's also come up of like, oh, we've been having this conversation for so long. So like how, if you're using natural touch points with system partners in particular, how does that look different from how you've maybe used them in the past for similar kinds of questions? And how are you addressing like the capacity issue, which I feel like I often run into when trying to use this particular strategy?
Any objections to going to natural touch points? All right, let's do it. Here we go. Same questions. I mean, do you want, should I keep these questions up or do you just want to talk about it? Do you want to see more of your faces? Yeah, okay. Let me pause it. Oop, you kind of know. You get the routine. So what have been people's experiences with leveraging natural touches with both families and partners? What's worked, what hasn't worked? What kinds of wisdom can you share? Oh, Brenda, you're on mute if you're talking. No, you weren't.
So we've been using the natural touch points in a couple of our counties, and working with our family liaisons who work with the preschools has been really very positive. They've been really engaged, helped us actually create the questions and put them into family-friendly language, where there's some questions that are pretty black and white and that we could do more of a survey. And our hub governance board decided to use all methods. But so like our question about high quality ECE, our question that's going to come from the liaison is, let's dream about your child's future. And when you think about your child's future and your childcare for your child, what does it look like? We kind of we're a little bit recoiling from the term high quality, because we also know families they're doing the best they can and they're using what's available. And when we say high quality, and what does high quality look like, that is almost shaming. It could be shaming for families, because I know what it is, but that's not what I'm using. I'm using the 15-year-old up the road. So just kind of changing some of the words on that. We've had, like I said, success with our family liaisons going to parent nights. I have a meeting with the health department after this to work with them in their cocoon program. And then we're also working with our home visitors. And I did encounter what you talked about, Dorothy, with the capacity. You know, they have so much to cover in the 1 hour they're there. And I just kind of minimized the idea of, you know, like it's nothing that you want to already be asking. It's kind of part of that engagement, really playing on that they trust you, the home visitor, more than me, and how is there a way that we could work it in? And so it was just kind of a negotiation of like, you know, if the families that you're seeing once a quarter, you have so much else to go over. Okay, not them. So let's turn it to the families that you're seeing every week, where you have a little bit more space. So that's what we've been doing.
That's great. Shira, check out the chat. You've got an audible around high quality. Maybe just think about that. Questions for Shira or other ways that people have used this method? I do want to give a quick shout out as you're talking. Shira, that was brilliant to engage the families and helping to get better language, like family-friendly language. That's like a nice added bonus of engaging peer, you know, in this kind of like natural touch point peer. We're blending it a little bit. So that was awesome.
I can go a little bit here, a couple of examples. I think this is a little bit like working puzzle pieces and finding the right pieces with the right capacity that matches our particular populations that we're wanting to learn more about. So we've done a little bit of matching the puzzle pieces. I think one example that really worked, it will work for us. It's all set up to go, so we'll see how it turns out in December. But as we teased out questions that we wanted to go a little deeper with some of the provider partners, we have our partners in practice, gathering listening circles already in place. And so integrating an opportunity to ask a couple of those questions and have dialogue with them while they were coming together is a great opportunity. So that I think is going to, on an ongoing basis, make sense for us as we're digging into things and kind of assessing progress as well, if we want to use it that way moving forward. And then we used a parent group to help us with the focus questions, similar to what Shira was talking about, so that we really had some confidence that
what parents were telling us, we were interpreting it right, and that we were understanding the questions in the same way they were understanding them. And so appreciated that assist from them and feel way better about the results coming down the road.
That's awesome. So getting it both in tailoring the questions, but then also making sense of the responses, that's very nice. That's very nice. Has anyone had any like struggles with this? It's a safe space. You know, I mean, it can be hard because I think, Dorothy, what you were maybe bringing up is, can't remember who was bringing it up, but I think Dorothy, like, how does this actually work? Because people are real busy, you know, and how do you make sure it doesn't overload them? Has anyone run into any issues with this that you had to problem solve, or that you could use some problem solving around?
I mean, I think not in this particular moment, but in the past, what has happened is when we have, it's kind of like a scatter shot. You're like, we know we're not going to get everybody to be able to support us. So like, let's just ask a whole bunch of different partners and see who says yes. And then that's actually going to, you know, like, or someone says no, and like, who has a similar population? I think the barrier for us in our community is, and it winds up just meaning that we have to use a different approach, is like when we want to talk to bilingual, bicultural families, we have one culturally specific organization who is at capacity. And so we have to find other avenues to connect with those families. And sometimes that means just being okay with like, we're not going to maybe talk to as many families as we could be if we went through a partner. We're going to talk to less families, but in a peer-to-peer, you know, setting, and get probably maybe some more in-depth information, because the setting is going to be different there than we would if we went through a natural touch point through community partners, say. So I feel like that's, you know, scatter shot and see what happens has been, you know, what we've done.
Right. Is it your sense that, this is not just for Dorothy, but others too, is it your sense that there are some parent leaders in your regions who do have a little bit of bandwidth to do some of this work? Because I've noticed most of the examples have been going through organizations. And I'm curious, I'm going to cheat and I'm going to ask about this one, even though we're not on that method. Like, have people had any success with hiring parents to do some of the outreach, given just how at capacity the organizations you brought up have been?
We actually did it in Washington County. So we hired like parent leaders that are bilingual, and then we placed them at the WIC program and at the ODHS offices so that they could actually interview parents, and it was really successful.
That's awesome. Begonia, is there anything you did that made that successful? Like, why did it work?
ODHS was also really curious about the answer from the people that they serve, and the people that step up to do the work. They were highly motivated and they were not shy. So they didn't hesitate in approaching families as well. It was not just like, okay, I have a table and you come to me. No, they actually approached them. So not a problem. But when partnering with BIPOC communities, what we do is when we design the survey, then we have gathering a meeting with the agencies that will be conducting the interviews or surveys with the families, and we review the questions together to make sure that they are in tune with their communities. And those questions that are not appropriate or can be tweaked, or it's like, this means absolutely nothing to families, we just modify them according to the feedback of our partners.
Mm-hmm. So I liked what you said there. You talked about it works better if the kind of either organization or even the families that you're working with have some buy-in and shared interest around what you're trying to find out.
Yeah.
You know, being able to like get a hook. Why should people care? Well, this is why you should care, because this information can help you too, even if you're a family. And also doing the legwork of prepping people in advance so that they were confident in being able to do it. Those were good, good words of wisdom.
And like I said, if there were questions that they said this is gonna take you nowhere, or the answers are gonna be extremely ambiguous, we just go with the flow with what they say that we have to be asking.
Yep. Jillian, do you want to talk a little bit more about what you said in the chat?
Can I ask a quick question, Begonia, before we move on?
Sure.
I'm just curious. So in those interactions between the parent and the questions, like how long was that exchange? Like what did that, and I don't know if I'm just really curious about the practicalities of like, hey, you have this parent at a WIC office and they're like, hey, let me ask you. Okay, I'll be honest. What I'm imagining is, there's people who stand on the corners and then they are like watching for the people who you're making eye contact with and run up and trying to get you to sign a petition. Like that's what I'm imagining.
Right.
I don't know that it's that aggressive, but I'm curious about what that looks like.
It is, because remember that when they actually go to ODHS or the WIC program, they actually had an appointment, right? And so even if you have an appointment, people arrive earlier and then it might be late, right? Their appointment. So they actually in some cases stay there for 15-20 minutes, and the parent leaders actually sit down next to them and say, oh, let me talk to you since you are not busy right now, right? And sometimes it took 5 minutes and some people took 45 minutes because they were just talking, and especially the ones that didn't have a good experience, they were like more eager to actually share what it went really bad, So, but like I said, it has to be somebody that is very comfortable in this role. And when people say, no, thank you, that's fine. I move to the next one, right? So we actually gather like, I think 300, 400 surveys through parent leaders. 300.
Dorothy, I'll say it's a huge range. Like I've seen other communities do it where it's under 5 minutes. It's one question, super simple. And then if they want to go in more in depth, they can, but like bare minimum, it's under 5 minutes. In fact, there was an organization in Michigan I worked with that they nicknamed it the Fast Five. What's a question you can ask families in under 5 minutes that anyone, whether it's the front desk person or a service provider or whoever, can quickly ask families, and it's not going to be a burden for anyone. And that worked really well for them.
That's kind of what I was gonna get at in my question for the group is, I'm curious, what exactly are the questions that you guys are asking families? Because I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around what exactly would we ask families in these ecosystems conditions, what's helping and hindering access to ECE. Those are all really jargony questions. What are the actual questions that you guys are getting feedback from families on?
I have an idea to make this easier. What if we create a list? Can we like create an integrated list? Because it might be hard for people to, like a bunch of people to share. I love Charlotte's request. Do you all give permission to the coaches that you're working with to just grab the questions we know you're using with families and just create a compiled list, and then we can send it to everyone? And if we don't have them, we'll ask you for them. So Charlotte, can I like put a pin in that so you can see it? Because I think there are really good examples of what people are asking. It just might be hard for people to respond to all of them here. Yeah, well, I mean, here's a question. Maybe we bridge off of that. Would people feel comfortable sharing all of their regional system assessment questions with folks? Like, can the coaches figure out a way to compile a summary so you can see kind of some of the similarities and differences? If you have any concerns about that, email me, and I'll find some clever way to make it so de-identified somehow. But yes, that's a great idea, Charlotte. We can definitely do that. Jillian, you did have something to say a long time ago, so I haven't forgotten about you, but Shira.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah. Sometimes, you know, it depends on the culture of the community that, you know, it's however the relationships are. So collectively in a group, there might be some turf issues that some don't feel comfortable speaking and some speak a lot. And then sometimes it seems like it's a vehicle for people to advertise their program. So we've appreciated your help with sifting through all that and coming up with the overall themes and issues versus, you know, sometimes people think it's about their program or it's not about somebody else's, or they just don't want to share because of past, you know, relationships. So that's what I was getting at.
Mhm. That's great. Shira, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that right now, like our focus has really been on getting family voice, and our questions and our partnering with our partners have really been focused on that. And so I would love to do a deeper dive on another day to kind of think about those other columns on the list to see how we can. I mean, we have our regular community partners that we see all the time, and then our community partners that we might not see as often. And then also like the business sector and like how to engage them and get their responses. So just wanted to put that up on the board, but put a pin in it.
Yep. No, that's great. Yeah, I mean, the conversation today has been very like early childhood system focused. And so you bring up a great question, Shira, like how do you bridge out? Because many hubs are interested in more cross-sector partnerships with business, with health, with local government, you know, lots of different entities. And how do you do that if you don't have those natural connections in place? That's great. Maybe think about that, and Hillary and I can think about some creative ways to try to keep this conversation going, even if it's not in an actual meeting, because like those are really important questions. And there's things that all of you have tried, and there's examples that Hillary and I can pull from like the research and the internet to get some additional ideas on how people have done this. So I'm capturing those questions here. If you have additional questions, just like what Shira asked and what Charlotte asked before, share them with us, because Hillary and I are really trying to work hard on figuring out how to promote more of this peer-to-peer learning between these types of meetings as well. Okay, we have 3 minutes left. Any other thoughts on any of the methods or other questions that you would like us to continue engaging in this way around?
Charlotte has her hand up.
Go, Charlotte, go.
I know I'm hesitant to ask this because I think it might be derailing the last of the conversation. But and this is on my mind because we just had the social emotional health metric meeting in our region. CCOs are asking questions of the same community partners and reaching out to families with the same age group because of their own requirements from Oregon Health Authority. Just thinking about how we can work together on these surveys. Maybe it's too short of a timeline for like this year, but their social emotional health metric is like multiple years in advance. Just want to put that out there, trying to like be conscious about how often we survey families and partners about the same questions.
Totally. That's a great question. I added that to my list.
Yeah, that's great, Charlotte. And I saw Brenda had a similar question / concern. Hillary and I are meeting with Family Connects, I think next week or week after, very soon. We have ongoing meetings with them, and I'll bring that up with them too. There's been a lot of survey questions. I've actually fended a couple of them off from you recently. I don't know about it. They came up all at once, but I'm laughing, but it is really like that is something where I think the state can play a coordinating role in trying to align those.
Well, and Charlotte, add that to your assessment. Like for me, the fact that there is not always alignment in those questions locally and at the state level, like bingo, that's something that you can strategize around very easily. Once you start seeing this stuff, everything is an RSA topic point. I can make an RSA bullet point out of anything, I think, at this point. But that's a great example. Okay, we have to go. Any feedback on how this went today? Anything that we should keep doing? Anything that we should switch up? What do people think? Dorothy, I know you want to say something.
Only to fill the silence. No, I appreciated it. It was helpful to hear other folks, and I love just how prepared you always are.
Good, well, then we'll keep doing it. If you have any ideas in addition to topics to bring in, do share them, because this, we want to design this how it will meet your needs and aspirations. So,
Erin, as you guys are talking, it came to my mind that email that Cassandra actually sent to us from the Office of Child Care, that they also want to have the same discussion with parents around health and safety policies, and the questions are pretty much the same, right? And I was like, okay, here we go. We just get this request after we are doing this thing. So that alignment internally will be really great, so that we can actually get all the answers at once a year.
well, Carmen and Hillary and I will brainstorm around how to think through that. That's good. Could you send us a list of who's working on the RA in each hub? Yes, like in terms of the staff who are working on it. Margie asked the question. Yes, okay, yes, I will do that. So we'll send the questions and who's working on it out to everyone. Okay, stay tuned. I'll try to get that out in the next couple days. Bye, everyone.
Everyone.